To the left, we have the LG C5. To the right, we have the Samsung S90D. And we're going to see how well LG stacks up against a quantum dot OLED, the best of the best there is. Now, I'm just going to spoil it for all of you. This is basically the WOLED QD OLED. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It doesn't have as clear of a picture as the Samsung S90D. That you're still going to need to go to Samsung for. And it definitely doesn't have the vibrancy or the brightness on the same level. However, that's not the entire story because there are other things that it does really, really good. One of the things it does exceptionally well is making sure the colors that it does have to work with is basically full-bodied color. And it clings to the television in such a way where it makes sure everything's pure, everything's rich, and you're not struggling to maintain that detail. Now, at this point in the video, I want to let you guys know that is only with my settings. And if you buy this TV, it is almost a necessity at this point to buy my settings. And I'm not joking. Usually people say that to fluff themselves up and just to get a sale for the sake of cashing out and making money. I'm saying this because if you don't buy my settings, you will see one of the ugliest pictures you've ever seen in your life, and I will prove it to you right now. So I'm going to open up settings on my LG C5, and I'm going to show you what I had to work with, okay? This is what I had to work with. This is cinema mode. Are you seeing that? This is what I turned it into. This is what I had to work with. That's cinema mode. We go to filmmaker mode. This is what I had to work with. This is what I've created. Go to vivid mode. This is what I had to work with. Go to my settings. This is what I've created. I'm not joking at all in any aspect when I tell you, you need my settings to see anything close to the image I'm representing in this comparison. A lot of people will try to sit here and say, oh no, it's not that, that's not the case, things like that. It's like, dude, no, you're gonna need my settings. There are no two ways about it. So I'll go ahead and turn off some volume just in case we get hit with some annoying copyright bullshit. Maybe we turn up like 1 so it leaves me alone there. And I'm telling you guys right now, like, and this is the case across, regardless, again, across a multitude of images. It doesn't matter what you look at. Scene for scene, if you don't have the settings that I have here, and you're just taking it out of the box, this is what you get. That is horrible. Like, if you would get beaten so badly, I mean, you can clearly see it now, but then when you have my settings and you look at them side by side, the S90D is like so amazing, and the C5 is right there in that so amazing category. This is like a sleeping giant, once in a blue moon type of television where LG not only tried, but they went in their back pocket and did their best. Now, I've had the chance to see the LG G5 earlier today, and I can tell you it has a little bit more in the way of washing out because of the extra brightness. So that extra brightness with the white subpixel, in fact, is hurting it on the G5 a little bit more. They are not as identical. This is something that, because again, it's not targeting the most aggressive brightness, it can color map a little bit better and maintain a little bit more purity. I think this is the right way to go for WOLED. I don't think you should be trying to be as bright as humanly possible. Now let's go into some of the negatives and some of the weaknesses. For starters, you're just not going to get the same level of clarity that you have on the Samsung, on the LG. It's not going to happen, not on this model. Maybe on the step-up model, which is where you might take the hit for the colors washing out a bit more on the G5. But, I mean, it's pick your poison type of deal because, again, when you look at what we have here, it's very clear. LG is just blurrier. I don't know what's going to show on YouTube, but the clarity here, the three-dimensionality, look for the lines. Look for the geometry, and you can see very clearly that this is just behind, and it's not as inky or dark or visibly clear. It's one of those things that, again, if you don't know, you will never see it, but if you pick it out, it becomes very, very evident. Now, again, that's not to say that the rest of the picture quality that I've experienced isn't just damn phenomenal, and it is. It's so amazing that it really does have me scratching my head and pondering, if this was always possible on WOLED, why the hell did it take so many years for LG to finally do this? We could have been eating good to the point where when QD OLEDs came out, we would have been like, it's not worth the markup because LG has just as good as picture. And again, all LG at this point would have had to have done for this TV to beat the S90D is be sharper and clearer with a little extra brightness. That's all they would have had to do, and they would have beaten the Samsung. But they didn't, so that's why, unfortunately, the overall winner is going to be the S90D. However, by a hair. Like, it was marginal, very, very marginal. And you talk about the color reproduction, I prefer the color reproduction of the LG more. I feel like it hits a lot more colors, more consistency. I prefer the vibrancy of the color more, though, on the Samsung. So you're going to run into that weird little battle where it's like in this example, LG, in my opinion, is slaughtering Samsung because Samsung is over brightening everything. And that over brightening isn't as aesthetically pleasing as having all of that balanced, beautiful color. That color feels rich and full-bodied, cinematic, in the best possible way where you are retaining all of the director's intent and creative intent. And in this example, I think is one of the better ones to show you. A lot of people always ask, Quantum, why do you use anime? Because anime has a multitude of colors, and when you are drawing something, there's no way to not gradate and shade and highlight. It's the ultimate way to look at an image and tell what is happening immediately, because it's merging and a meshing of geometry together to make an image. It's a drawing. And that is really helpful when we are analyzing a picture. And when we analyze this image, we can clearly see LG just has something a little extra for this particular example with my settings. Because again, if you remember what I said, this is where you're going to be. Let's say you want to be in vivid mode. This is what you're going to get. That is damn ugly. Let's say you want to be in cinema mode. That's what you're going to get. And the industry standard filmmaker mode, that's what you're going to get. You want to use the ISF modes, that's what you're going to get, and that's what you're going to get. It's going to be very ugly. There are no two ways about this. There's no getting around it. There's no begging it off. There's no pleading. There's no reasoning, nothing. You'll never come close to the stratosphere of LG C5 that I've created if you do not buy my settings in the membership. Again, just join and you'll have access. It's $4.99, and you go from this ugly picture, you go from this ugly picture in vivid mode to something like this. And when you see the difference, you're gonna be saying, hot damn, this is why he said I need those settings. And when you get this TV, for those who are buying this TV, I really want you to take the time to, for yourself, not just for me, for yourself, plug in my settings and then toggle between every last picture preset you would have had if I didn't make settings. It will be so evident and so very clear why I speak the way I do about these TVs, because again, it kind of shows itself and produces itself for what it is. Again, I've never seen an LG this good looking. I will go on the record to say this is not only better than the LG C1, this is the best LG I have ever seen in my life. LG has never been at this level. LG has never produced an image this rich, this gorgeous, this amazing. And the fact that they are doing it now has me completely blown away. Now let's talk about the gaming aspect, because I think that's where a lot of the contrast nature of both of these TVs really shines quite amazingly well. LG is honing in on the darkest parts of the image and enhancing them and making them darker. Samsung finds the brighter parts and lifts those highlight details, all while giving you clarity that is just three-dimensional. And I think for gaming, the three-dimensional aspect makes the Samsung S90D just a treat. But the LG, with their true-to-life visuals and their very beautiful way of rendering contrast, is going to pull you in. Both of these TVs are wildly three-dimensional, and you're going to have a ton of fun. And I think everybody remembers this very iconic scene from Uncharted 4, where Nathan Drake is sitting on the couch with his wife and eating. And I think when we watch a scene like this, we can kind of piece together what is happening here. Okay, for starters, there's just a ton of contrast detail, particularly facially, on the LG C5. We are seeing a ton of shadows and shading, and it all just looks very moody and very nice and very rich. Again, when we look at the Samsung, it's more than I'd like with the brightness. The brightness is affecting the colors on the Samsung. And I notice in this scene, I don't have that purity of the skin tones particularly. Skin tones just kind of start becoming more clipped or white or over whitened when they're supposed to have melanin in those skin tonalities to show the tan beneath the skin, where everybody, again, just looks really pale. That is not the right way to do things, as LG is clearly showing in this example. Albeit, again, the clarity is undeniable. Like, you look at these two and you look in their eyes and you're believing everything they're doing. You believe the conversation, you believe the scene. You look at the little seams and stitching of the pillow, and the Samsung is just on an entirely different level with what they fed the S90D. And then you start to really feel this slow zoom in pan moment as Nathan Drake is thinking about that mission, that job he wants to go on. And again, you're in the story now, right? You're locked in. You believe this moment. On the LG, because of the dim nature of the screen, don't get me wrong, you do believe it, you do enjoy it, but you feel more like you're watching a TV. And again, when you look at this example, it's very clear what's happening. It's like, it's not, how do I say this? It's not the best, but it's not the worst either when you talk about like the representation of it. You want it to be the S90D with the color of the LG, if that makes sense. Like, if the Samsung was able to give me this level of color and immersion here, I wouldn't have any gripes or anything to complain about. But the fact that they can't is where ultimately we do have some issues, and it does start to feel a little flat by comparison. Let's look at good old Aunt May in this example. I think this is the strongest representation of LG you'll ever see anywhere. Because in this example, you're seeing a ballet of the cyan reproduction, and it just looks damn beautiful. In addition to the lovely cyan, you're seeing, again, just how true to life LG is able to get. They're doing a wonderful job of producing an image while giving you the clarity and the sharpness. In this example, unfortunately for LG though, Samsung just has the extra three-dimensionality through the sharpness that gives you that appearance of depth. And this is where Samsung's real depth enhancer can be felt a lot more. So again, as a gamer, you're going to appreciate a scene like this way more, especially when they get to those pan-up shots of the characters' faces, and you need to see the wrinkles and the details and all that. And again, the shading on the S90D is immaculate, very beautiful. The colors though on the LG keep my eye coming back over to it like this is actually really good. If I were to speak to what kind of TV this reminds me of, this reminds me a lot of the Sony X900E back in the day with the way they reproduced color. Now that is a massive statement, but it couldn't be any more true if I tried to make it. It's like a modern modern X900E, because the amount of contrast and color that it kicks off is absolutely at that level. And then you get a little bit extra benefit, right? And that, again, it's an OLED, so you have the deeper black levels. This is basically like what we wanted from the X900E, but again, in an OLED body. I wish I was getting the same motion, if I'm being honest with you. Motion on the LG a little bit weaker than Samsung. Unfortunately, you do have more instances where there is a bit more artifacting, a bit more juddering. Again, this is with motion processing. I imagine with it off, they both look equally crappy for motion. But again, you can kind of piece this together and look little by little, bit by bit, and see what I'm talking about as it goes, again, scene after scene. But again, the fact that the LG is able to maintain this level of contrast and clarity and still give you this kind of picture, even though it's not coming in at the astronomical price point of its G5 counterpart, I think is damn impressive. Again, this really is the best LG I've ever seen in my life. And again, when we run that back and you watch the fast moving moments, again, there are just more artifacts on the LG and a bit more in the way of motion blur. Now, video games naturally add motion blur, but it's LG that kind of takes it a little bit extra, you know, with that impact of it, because it's slower to respond than the S90D. And the S90D is just like, again, it's like looking at a crystal. That's the only way I could describe it. And that, I'm not going to lie, is really gorgeous when you consider those highlights too. Now, that also brings in the next part of this conversation. They're both about the same price. And if they're both about the same price, I mean, which TV should you get ultimately? And I think a lot of people are going to struggle with this. I would say if you're a skin tone person and you like color, you're probably going to be better off with the LG overall. However, if you like vibrancy and highlights and clarity that's like crystal clear, tack sharp, then the S90D is going to be your guy. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if in the comment section there are a bunch of people saying, oh, well, hell, I prefer the look of the LG a lot more than the look of the Samsung for these examples. That's completely normal for people to again, have a preference and for it to go back and forth. I can't stress how good, though, the LG is doing against the Samsung S90D. And these examples, the color is identical, and they at literally so many points look identical. The fire is better on LG, way more orange and rich. Skin tones are better on LG. And it gets to such a point where this back and forth starts to get ridiculous. Like, they trade back and forth to a point where, honestly, the Samsung does edge it out in very key and important areas. But honestly, it really makes me want to say that they are tied. It really does. The only reason I don't call it a tie is because that clarity loss is substantially significant. And that's the only reason. If they had a bit more clarity, though, I'm telling you right now, I would tie them like straight away because it looks really, really good. Moving on to our next gaming example, you can clearly see that both TVs look very similar, and then coming out of black and going into white, we look for the contrast to be there. And again, the only thing I can think of is identical as a way of describing these two, but the clarity on that Samsung is just freaking ridiculous. Because when you have a really high level of brightness, but your black levels are just damn inky, you create this 3D immersion that I keep talking about and keep bringing up. And it gets to such a point where you're like, damn, this is like the absolute next level and feels just damn incredible to be looking at. And again, it's going to trade back and forth a lot of the time, depending on, again, a various amount of factors, what you're watching or, you know, what picture presets you're using, again, so on and so forth. A lot of possibilities and combinations. But again, what the S90D is doing is absolutely spectacular. Beautiful picture quality. The rocks look so three-dimensional and so gorgeous. Albeit, I look at the color of the LG, and the Samsung is just not giving me the same color that the LG is. You know, in some areas where I would find I want a little extra warmth here in the fire, or, you know, I want a little bit more in the way of, again, skin tonality. It's trade-off. It trades back and forth. But again, the overall impact for sure, I've got to give it to the Samsung S90D, because in this scene, an example, it just has my attention more. And you're watching this chariot go through the sky and it's all fiery and everything. And you're just looking at it and you're just more immersed on Samsung. And again, I think that's the other thing, is I think they need to find a happy medium. I think the G5 should be the one that targets the crazy 4,000 nits. But honestly speaking, I really do think that for the C-Series, they need to get it up to at least 1,500 nits in SDR, or an average of 1,200 nits in SDR, regardless of what happens. So it's never going to change. And then HDR maybe goes up to 1,500 nits. You know what I mean? So it's not quite the G5 or G6 at that time or whatever it will be, but it's damn good and it still holds its own. I really think that's the right direction to go, because as you clearly see, this is just a very, very strong picture quality, and there are honestly no two ways about it, because as I'm looking at the special effects pop off and everything, I genuinely am enjoying what I'm seeing on both. Now, for those who remember, I've used this image for a multitude of years, and the reason I use this is because this shows a rich balance between cyan and red and a bunch of different other colors and contrast as well. And in this example, the LG just pulls so far ahead of the Samsung in color reproduction that it's honestly wild to say that it's not a QD OLED. And this is a testament to what LG has achieved. I mean, the yellow is better. I mean, the cyan is better in this example. Again, pretty much the skin tones and a lot of, again, the details are shining through a lot better. And this is when we get to more of those like contrasty elements with a black background where you have bright objects. That's where it looks good as well. Another area where LG really does shine is when you look at the background information and you look at like something like a sunset scene. Samsung, unfortunately, is just not as good with producing their oranges and their reds and all that stuff as we have here. Now, to be fair, you can always oversaturate the Samsung to pull off a more impactful look. And this right here is the perfect case in point of that. Now, rocking more saturation, you're able to see a lot more vibrancy. And now the red detail can't be touched. Samsung runs away with that. It runs away with the magenta reproduction. And the cyan reproduction does look a lot better, along with the blues. Albeit the overall yellow is still not good. And I think, again, that does start to affect skin tones a bit. But again, it does have a time and a place where you would want to use a more saturated color space like native. Now let's look at the Saint Seiya video game, okay? We're seeing where LG is producing a rich image, again, with what they have. And I feel like more TV manufacturers ought to take this at face value and do this. Again, when I say producing a rich image with what you have, it's not trying to produce the most vibrant picture for vibrant picture's sake, or it's not trying to be the brightest to be the brightest. As you can clearly see in this example, the Samsung is definitely way brighter for that highlight detail. There's no arguing that. But the overall picture quality tends to suffer a bit because now you notice the face is clipping a bit more, where that has the detail maintained along with the hair and things like that. But the clarity is astronomical on the Samsung, so most people will forgive it and not really care. But at the end of the day, we're after a balance. And I think with what LG had, they did a great job of balancing, again, their limitations of the white subpixel without, partnering with Samsung to give you that level of vibrancy. Because come on, that blue armor is just popping on the S90D. It's insane. It absolutely looks incredible. But the LG is right there. And to be able to say that LG is right there is like mind-boggling. Didn't think that would happen. Now, LG is not there for every example. Like the blue in this example, it's just weaker. It's just going to be weaker because those quantum dots are coming through a lot more. Now, yes, hypothetically speaking, I can go into BT 2020 and I can change things around. But what I've noticed is when I do that, the reds get really sour. So BT 2020 isn't really viable on this display, and it's not really worth it to do that. I think you're good with the BT601 color space the way I've set it up. I think that will give you, as you can clearly see, quantum dot-like performance. And there are just no two ways about that, as we are literally seeing right here on camera. The fact that they are looking this identical, again, the Samsung looks better here, but LG has that shadow detail and that. It's shading is what it is. The LG, because of the way that they do contrast, it just looks damn good. And I mean, that's you know what I mean? You're really talking about two key differences when you talk about these two displays. LG is about giving you the most amount of detail while giving you that full volume color that feels rich and pure. Samsung's about popping off the best highlights, the most amount of vibrancy to give you that wow, that shock and awe. But to be honest, what Samsung is doing is not accurate because it does tend to make the skin tones suffer a bit. And when the skin tones are suffering, you've kind of got to dial down at least the luminosity of particular, shades of skin. And I really wish they would go LG's route with the way LG does a color management system. Because if Samsung had an appropriate color management system instead of an RGB mixer, because I don't consider that a color management system, well, then we would be seeing substantially better color out of the Samsung S90D to the point where LG would never have a chance to compete. But we don't have that, and that's why we have these trade-offs to the level of which we do. Regardless, though, you can clearly see it looks good, just not consistent across all imagery. Now, that doesn't mean that just because Samsung overbrightens things that when LG isn't overbrightening that they've just got it won. Because what I've noticed is that when there's a lot of tungsten light, like in a scene like this, LG gets it wrong. Very wrong in the way that the skin tones start to appear a little bit greenish in hue. And there's always, with like really tan skin, particularly like with Japanese anime, it feels a lot more like it's just this really there's no nice way to say it, pissy green, greenish yellow, when you have these warm color temperatures required to get to the next level of color that LG has to offer. Now, of course, you can make everything look really, really blue, and I don't recommend doing that because you're going to lose all of the color advantages I talked about. But there is just that extra moment where you're like, it's not looking as good as it should. Not to say that, again, it's all the time, but it is some of the time. In an example like this, though, it looks really good. I think skin tones are decent. And again, Samsung really is falling behind substantially in this area. The yellow cloak, not having as much detail. The red is more vibrant. But again, it doesn't have as much detail because that highlight detail is just hazing out a bit more of those finer details. And again, this is where even though it's an OLED, you can still run into that issue for sure. Where, again, the 90D is fantastic. I mean, I don't know anybody who'd say it's not. I mean, look at this example. It's absolutely slaughtering LG as far as the clarity, the color pop and reproduction and everything. It looks fantastic, but it doesn't slam dunk or dominate in every single example, even though it does have that good picture quality. So again, just something to keep in mind. Now, rounding this out, as we look at more demo-based kind of content, we can clearly see that they are very, very ridiculously, wildly identical. They are albeit that red on the Samsung, I'm sorry to say, it's just not being touched. The reproduction is just so rich and so popping and vibrant and gorgeous. LG doesn't have a prayer with that, but what they did do is refine what they could do. And I think that's the right answer. Instead of trying to be someone else or trying to do something you can't accomplish, be yourself. And I think LG stuck with their guns and what they knew about their picture processing and the limitations and capabilities. And what we've arrived at is a truly beautiful display. Again, the S90D edges it out. It looks way better as far as the vibrancy, but LG has detail and skin tone accuracy that also is to die for. Even though they're not quantum dot level, as you are clearly seeing, and this is obviously where that is going to be very apparent. The amount of detail they've been able to achieve to arrive very, very close to the quantum dot level, at least at the highest end when we talk about quantum dot OLEDs, is just remarkable. Again, LG is behind, and by comparison, their reds are still a bit orange compared to their native color space that Samsung has to offer, which again can tend to oversaturate things here and there versus the normal color space, which in a lot of applications I'd recommend because you get a slight uptick in contrast. But albeit, Samsung is doing its best to hang in there. But I think in examples like this, you are clearly seeing that extra color be a benefit on the Sony, and why ultimately I say, or rather the Samsung, and ultimately you'll see why I say that the Samsung is just the better image, because it does have that look, it does have that pop and that shock and that awe, and you really do start to feel a lot more of the picture quality. You just do. Again, if we are going to have a conversation about which one is more accurate, which one looks better, again, I think that is up to, I guess, the person and their preference. But at the end of the day, I think, again, they both are doing an exceptional job. One thing I love to look at is grass, because the conversation of grass and fields for sports events like soccer or football, it just becomes very overplayed. I wanted to show that even in the native color space, Samsung still has gorgeous grass, and it is in this example the more realistic looking grass. LG is just a little bit more pale by comparison because it's not using quantum dots, but it still looks good. Now, when we talk about the produce and things of that nature, LG is rendering all the greenery equally as good as what I have on the Samsung, and I honestly like the look of the contrast a bit more on the LG. It brings out a little bit more of the warmth in those green grapes, again, showing the nuanced color between the ripe ones and the overripe ones to a great degree, where the Samsung's not really doing that. So again, there are moments where LG, with the way that their color paletry looks, can be just super aesthetically pleasing. Though this example is starting to highlight and showcase that clarity difference that I was talking about throughout the video. If you pay close attention to this bell pepper, you can clearly see there is just such a sharp line and isolation that can't be denied. And you can see it through here and all this. The foliage will always show you isolation, geometry, and clarity. And that's why we're using this, because if you look, I mean, this is just so much clearer than what we have over here. And for one that might think this is maybe a luminosity difference thing, it's not. This is everything to do with, again, just a better processor. So even though LG is doing great this year, they aren't slam dunking it, okay? They're not like home running it to the point where the Samsung has no hope in competing. Because again, there's a reason why Samsung is the winner of this comparison. I think it becomes very clear when you look at a generality of scenes and a multitude of them. But at the end of the day, I think the LG is absolutely quantum dot level, holding its own with the champion of champions like the Samsung S90D, and in examples like this, overtaking it. The fact that it can even overtake the Samsung, and even one example, is an accomplishment for not having quantum dots. In this example, the LG is overtaking the Samsung as well. Again, not in every example like, and now the Samsung is just bodying the LG with way more detail and realistic color. And it's, again, going to trade back and forth. Again, Samsung for this example, but you get what I'm saying. Overall, LG really showed up at a level they've never, ever, ever, ever been at. And I cannot stress how impressive that is. And honestly, it's way more impressive to see a WOLED performing like a QD OLED than a QD OLED, maintaining what a QD OLED's supposed to do. So I think for the impact alone, the LG is just damn fucking impressive. And I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anybody. It's basically a quantum dot OLED. Look at how identical these images are. Now again, I say for the umpteenth and bazillionth time, this is only with my settings. You cannot do this with default settings. I will end the video by showing you what your picture would have looked like this entire comparison if I didn't use my settings. We'll use something like vivid mode, and then it's overly blue and clipped and ugly. We use cinema mode, it's dingy and pissy, but I will end the video showing you that pissy, ugly image because it's reference accurate, and this is what people tell you should do. That's what you would have. It does not look good. She looks like a damn ghost. That looks like a ghost town. That is ugly. It's nowhere near what it's supposed to be. And the message becomes clear. If you don't have my settings, you are not going to see the information that I've been highlighting throughout this comparison. She's going to be blue. Everything's going to be green. It's going to be washed out, and it's not going to be worth your time. Without my settings, this is just the run-of-the-mill bullshit TV. I mean, look at it. I mean, there's vivid mode, there's cinema mode, there's filmmaker mode, there's ISF bright mode, there's expert ISF dark mode, and then there's my settings. So when you see the work that I put in, take it seriously and listen to what I'm telling you because I'm trying to help you. This TV is far more capable than what anyone on YouTube has shown you. I will continue to say that because it is true. And I will say, absolutely grab yourself a C5 regardless of what anyone else thinks and watch the magic happen when you plug in my settings. And I'm serious. Make sure you compare my settings to every other picture preset in that TV too. It'll blow your damn mind. But that being said, this is an amazing comparison. The winner is the S90D. The black levels, the reds, everything, the color, way better, clarity, way better. But the LG showed up and did its damn thing and came a great second with an honorable fight trying to get that first place spot. That being said, though, I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. The #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.